Perfect. Thank you. All right. So our meeting is officially starting 6:01, call to order. And Amy, can we do the roll call?
Yes, Chair Cancino.
Here.
Vice Chair Junio. Vice Chair Junio, are you present?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I was probably muted. I am here.
Great. Commissioner Flores.
Present.
Commissioner Garcia.
Present. Yeah.
Commissioner Hobson Cord.
Present.
Commissioner Perez. Commissioner Perez. Not yet present. Commissioner Sanders.
Present.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Amy. And now we'll move on to the next item, which is reading of the land acknowledgement. Vice Chair Junio.
And good evening again, everybody. So before I read the land acknowledgement, I just want to just make a brief statement as to what is a land acknowledgement, just so that we are all aware of what it is that I'm about to make. So a land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects the indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of the land. And so we want to know why do we make a statement? So we do so as an expression of gratitude and appreciation to the original people who have been living and working on this land from time immemorial. So in essence, from the beginning. So that is what a land acknowledgement is. And that is a reason we are going to incorporate a land acknowledgement before the start of each of our regular board meetings. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and read the statement that was provided to me by Chair Cancino. Thank you. We want to acknowledge that we gather in San Mateo County on the traditional land of the Ohlone peoples, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We honor and respect the Ohlone people's long history here that reaches beyond European colonization. We honor and respect the indigenous people who have lived and continue to live upon this territory and whose practices and spiritualities are tied to the land and its other inhabitants today.
Thank you, Vice Chair Junio, and thank you for that explanation at the beginning. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Perfect. On to the next item. We'll be doing the agenda review. If everybody could take a minute and look at the agenda as well, and if anybody needs to make any changes. Okay. Is there any, I think I could just go on to the next one, right, Amy? Or does there need to be, okay, perfect. All right, so no changes to the agenda. So we will continue on. Now we will continue on to public comment. Amy?
Thank you, Chair Cancino. For public comment, members of the public are invited to virtually raise their hands to join the queue to speak. One person at a time will be unmuted and invited to speak, then will be muted again. To virtually raise your hand, if you're in the meeting via the Zoom platform or application, click the raise hand button at the bottom right of the window. If you're in the meeting exclusively by phone, you can dial *9 to virtually raise your hand. So looking for any raised hands. Don't see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. And anything submitted electronically, email or anything?
No.
Any notes passed?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, next line item, I believe is the approval of the meeting minutes from our last commission meeting on June 20th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Anybody want a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Flores. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hobson-Cord. Amy, we need to do a roll call for approving the meeting minutes.
I believe so.
All right,
Okay, Commissioner Sanders,
Approve.
Commissioner Perez.
Aye.
Hi, was that welcome? Nice to see you. Was that a yes to approving the minutes?
That was a yes.
Okay,
Correct.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Hobson-Cord,
I approve.
Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Garcia. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I approve. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Flores,
Approve.
Vice Chair Junio,
I approve.
and Chair Cancino.
aye, approved.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. On to the next line item, discussion regarding the use of pronouns and how it's applicable to the commissioners. Amy, I think we got something for that, right?
Yes, thank you. Chair Cancino indicated an interest in introducing the concept of sharing pronouns with the commissioners. Pronouns are usually he, him, she, her, they, them, or other arrangements. You can add your pronouns to your Zoom name and also when you introduce yourself. Sharing your pronouns fosters an inclusive environment for people who are transgender, non-binary gendered, or have other gender identifications. By sharing your pronouns, you can make it more comfortable for a person with one of these gender identifications to share their gender by indicating their pronouns to you. Sharing pronouns aligns with a culture of safety, inclusion, belonging, respect, and equity. If you'd like to add your pronouns now to your Zoom name, you can go, if you're able to see participants at the bottom, and pull up a list of names. Are you all able to see names when you hit participants? Yep, okay. And then if you hover over your name, you can go to more and rename, and feel free to add your pronouns to your Zoom name if you like. We will also plan to have more training on gender and sexuality issues in the future. Any questions on sharing pronouns? Okay.
If I could just say one thing, I'm also hoping, if people do have questions or want to know more about things, definitely bring it when we do the training, bring those questions so we can have honest conversations about things. I feel like there might be questions or people not knowing things. So definitely want to urge people to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the next line item, which is the equity awareness training for the commission. And I think, Amy, you're going to do an introduction.
Yes, I am very pleased to briefly introduce Myra Jolivet. Myra has a consulting company, Center for Consulting. She worked with our previous commission on racial and social equity, and she's also previously given a DEI training to city staff. So Myra has graciously agreed to provide us a training on structural racism and some foundations of equity work concepts. Welcome, Myra.
Thank you so much. And hi to all the familiar faces. It's great to see you guys again. And the new faces, great to see you as well. I'm going to, first of all, say that it's really an honor and a privilege for me to be a part of something that is so, you're changing the nature of your community in a positive way. And I just want to, take my hat off to you and give you guys kudos for what you're doing. It's not easy work. I said that to get into the fact that the things we're going to talk about, and I'll try to, and I want to be respectful of time. I'll try to get through as many slides as I can. I wanted to put a lot of things together for you. But the things we're going to talk about are not easy to hear. And so I just want us to set that tone of where let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me too, in many ways that you don't know. And in fact, I'll share with you, one of my grandfathers was white, one was black, and one of my grandmothers was Chickasaw. And so we're going to hit all these areas so when I tell you about discomfort, I absolutely understand. But let's take the courage that you have for what you're doing in this great work, and let's go for it. And let's, become aware of some of the historical legacies that live with all of us. So with that, I won't be able to see all of you. So if anyone is raising a hand or something like that, you guys just speak out and let me know, hey, someone wants to make a comment, or someone, because I can only see a limited number of names. So this is pretty much the welcome. Like I said, I'm so honored to be with you. Let's dig in and go through the agenda. First, Amy is going to state the purpose of our session today.
Thanks, Myra. The purpose of the session, because our task is large and will involve delving into uncomfortable concepts. At the same time, we'd like to align with factual history to set in motion a trajectory toward uniquely relevant recommendations. I think this training is helping to set a foundation for why we do equity work. It's because our society has built systems that have disadvantaged some groups, leading to unequal outcomes today. We engage with an equity lens to undo these inequities and provide access and opportunity for all.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And we begin, the thing about awareness, once you have it, you don't lose it. So that's what we want to do. We want to bring to the forefront more factual information that prepares you guys for this big task that you have. So let's start with definitions and terminology so that we're all on the same page. And we'll have some examples. So I start with equity versus equality. And some of you may be familiar with this, maybe not, but obviously in your position on this commission, it is important for you to know that these two words are not equal. They are not interchangeable, because equality is giving the exact same thing to everyone. Equity is when you distribute resources based upon meeting people where they are, based upon need. And I found an image that I want to share with you. And anyone, tell me what the first picture, that first row of pictures, says to you. That's the line of equality. Anybody? Do you see what's happening there?
Somebody's being left out, not considered.
Right. Because I guess it was well intentioned. Let's give everybody a bicycle. Let's give everybody the same bicycle. But we see the problem with that, right? Somebody's in a wheelchair, someone's super tall, someone else the bike fits just right, and someone else is really short. Equity shows us a different picture.
Mm-hmm.
We see people getting things according to their needs. So that, I think, is a very important definition as we move ahead. The word racism is so often misused. So let's just get clear on it. A belief or doctrine that inherent differences among the various human racial groups determine cultural or individual achievement, usually involving the idea that one's own race is superior and has the right to dominate others, or that a particular racial group is inferior to others. So we interchange the words prejudice, discrimination. That's how it can very often act out, or that's how it manifests. But the belief system, racism, is the belief that I'm better than you, just born better. And so that is where we want to really get grounded in understanding that terminology. Then we ramp it up to structural and systemic racism. This is about systems, policies, programming, practices, laws, even. Structural racism, these are used interchangeably very often. It's a system where public policies, institutional practices, cultural representation, other norms reinforce ways to perpetuate group inequity, racial group inequity. Laws that are embedded, concepts that are embedded into our laws, our regulations, and they manifest as insidious discrimination. Discrimination that is so baked into our everything that it impacts every aspect of life. And we'll talk more about that in the subsequent slides. So when we talk about government supported or structural systemic racism, I'm going to start with African Americans. You'll see African Americans, the most targeted group to date in the United States. Well, during slavery, it was illegal for enslaved Africans to be educated. And then, after that, in many of the states, once it became legal post-slavery, the schools were intentionally under-resourced. And so that was a systemic and government creation that kept people in an inferior state when it came to education, or attempted to. Housing and home ownership, the GI Bill, Black veterans couldn't fully benefit from the GI. It took several years later and many struggles and fights to make that available as it was for other veterans. Social Security was structured so that Black and brown workers were excluded from Social Security and from protection by the National Labor Relations Act. FHA, oh my goodness, the FHA actually promoted racial covenants and refused home loans for Black and brown families. In some cases, white families that lived next to or near Black and brown families were refused loans. That's how deep that went. And we all know about voting rights and the struggles for people to get the right to vote. There were Black codes in the Deep South. I heard about these. My parents were from South Louisiana, even though I was from here, but I knew about things like sunset laws where a Black person could not walk the streets after 9 o'clock in some communities. Once the right to vote was realized in the Deep South, it was very common for a Black person to be told, well, before you vote, you have to pay a poll tax, or you have to recite the preamble to the Constitution, or do some such, things like that. This is where we talk about racism as a system, not just some person who doesn't like other people. Black and Latino students in South San Francisco district are disproportionately suspended, and when we look at those disproportionalities, we have to wonder what's happening in a system when this is allowed to perpetuate. So very often we'll have situations where a student of one race is treated very differently in punishment phases than another. So when you're suspended, at that point, that's impacting your entire education because you're not going to perform as well. Look at the numbers we have. African American, 3.6% of students suspended, 63% Hispanic Latino, 49% of the student body Indigenous or American Indian, 0.2%, Pacific Islander 3.6. I'm assuming you guys can see these very well. Asian 5%, Filipino 11% of students suspended. And then they get into students of 2 or more races, and then some that are not reported. This disadvantages people based on their race. And these are statistics from the Racial and Social Equity Commission from last year. Black and Latino children are underrepresented in early childhood education. And we all know that that's a basis for, your success in elementary school and moving on beyond that. High quality education is definitely about where you live. I have a video that will speak to that. And there's an intentionality in that, in where people were directed to live, where schools weren't as good, where the environment wasn't as good. Some of these things, most of these things are not accidents. So 31% of Asian children and 28% of white are enrolled in early childhood education. In San Mateo County, Latino, Black, and Pacific Islander children are not. 25% for Latino, Black children enroll, Black and Latino, and then 23% for Pacific Islander having access to this kind of benefit. Now, this was a big thing that happened in 2020. The National Association of Realtors has been around for more than 150 years. And it has been the nervous system of the real estate industry in the country. They actually made a public apology for their part in structural racism. They opposed the Fair Housing Act in 1968, which in April of 1968, that act went into law, which, made discriminating in housing illegal. So what they admitted to and said was discrimination was part of systemic residential racism. I need to move the pictures a bit, you guys. Residential racial segregation led by the federal government and supported by the US banking system through practices like redlining. We all know home equity is the biggest source of household net worth, and that's according to the Federal Reserve. So putting so-called minorities, I sometimes have an issue with that term, at a disadvantage generation after generation. Redlining is what I alluded to earlier, where you direct people to neighborhoods that are intentionally disadvantaged. But for the National Association of Realtors to come out and admit this, and admit that they played a role in this, was pretty big, was huge. So here's a video that I brought along, and I'm hoping that it rolls just right. This is about the intentional creation of advantage and disadvantage. It's like 4 minutes, so it's not super long. So let me roll this for you guys, and let me know if you can't hear it.
I don't think I hear it.
No, I can't hear it.
No, I can't hear.
You can't hear it?
No.
No.
Oh, I think
Mara, do you think it'll play through a web browser?
Yeah, I think if we click on that link, it might be able to come up, and then maybe we could full screen it or something.
I think I have it. Shall I pull it up, Myra?
She's still on.
Yeah, she's still on, but she is muted, so.
Can you hear that?
okay, now I'm not muted.
Okay.
Thank you, Myra.
Should I stop sharing, Myra?
Oh, no, go for it. If we can hear it from yours,
Okay,
let's do it.
Let me know if you can hear.
Cannot hear.
I'm not hearing it either. Okay. I don't know why that's an issue. When I sent it to you, you could hear it. I don't understand that. Well,
Did you hear
let's just, I don't hear it. So I'll paraphrase from what those slides are saying. And can you guys see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay. So in that video, and we could send the link. I think you guys may have had it in your pre-read, but it basically lays out the history and the strategy of in making sure there were disadvantages for people of color, so that they were in neighborhoods that were closer to environmentally dangerous things, factories or things like that. So it was unhealthy, less resources, fewer resources for education and schools. And so it's the intentional creation of ghettos that happened long ago and perpetuated in this country. And then as a result of that, which, you know, it's not magic, everything has a source, right? So then you have a racial wealth gap, because these strategies were done according to race to intentionally create gaps in wealth, access, and influence. And so this particular graphic shows how dramatic the numbers are, because obviously, if you make less money, even for the same job, if you're discriminated against because of what you look like and you're paid a lower rate, you have less money to begin setting a foundation for wealth, less money to buy, you know, a home, less money to pay for a better education, less money to do all the things that are necessary to keep your family successful and healthy. And so the purpose of that in this part of the discussion is to show that, once again, these things don't fall from the sky. These were intentional strategies. And I think in your work as an equity commission, it is so important for you to see, if you haven't before, this kind of information. So you may ask the question, why lead with race? Because we're going to talk about many more, you know, of the relational issues. Well, this is why. This is what it's always been about, for whatever reason. I can't tell you why this is the issue. I don't know if any of us know. I don't know if any of us living today can really answer the question of why were people kidnapped and brought to this country and sold as property and animals. But I do know that race is baked into every system, despite income. When Oprah Winfrey can go into Hermes store, and she is a multi-billionaire with a B, and a clerk there can assume that because she's a Black woman, she can't afford a purse. That is not only nonsensical and ridiculous, it speaks to that baked in assumption that when I'm around somebody with brown skin, they are lesser. And so that's what I'm sure, as you continue on the commission, these issues are going to creep into some of your work, and you're going to hear about some of these things, and it has an origin. That's our legacy, you guys, and it's tough stuff. So now you guys talk to me a bit. Do you see structural racism? Do you see it in institutions? You don't have to name them, but does this resonate with you? Please talk to me.
Absolutely.
And how do you see it play out? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, definitely in housing, but more so now, I see it play out in access to technical jobs, to the higher paid software engineering jobs, to those prestigious positions in tech that keep you employed and able to buy a house and able to have a leisure life, right? Able to afford things. So that's how I've seen it play out recently.
Yeah, it definitely, you know, the tech industry has gotten national attention for that kind of thing, because leadership positions in the tech industry, you are given stock. Now you pay taxes on it, but you are given stock. And so to reach that level, not only do you have the great salary, it's compounded by the other perks. And that's a corporate tradition. You know, in corporate America, anyone who was a department head was basically awarded, gifted stock as part of their compensation. So once again, if you can't make it to those levels, you don't get that advantage as well. Anyone else? Remember, I can't see everybody's hand before I go on.
I'd have to
Here-
say education. I like that. That was a big one for me, certain. Especially like higher education, colleges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can see why in the African-American community, the creation of Black universities was necessary. You know, so that's where that came from. And I guess it's been 250, maybe 300 years of some of the older Black universities that are still around, but it was necessary. Intersectionality, this is an important word for you guys. You're going to want to get grounded with this word. And I have a thing where I don't like to be the only one talking. Can I get a volunteer to read the definition of intersectionality? And then we'll pick it apart.
I'll go ahead and read the definition.
Thank you.
Put simply, intersectionality is a concept that all oppression is linked. The interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, sexuality, gender, age, and disability, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. Intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, and we must consider everything and anything that can marginalize people.
Do you see why this is going to come to play in your role? People experience different levels of discrimination. It's not the same in every instance. And so when your minds are open to that, and when you don't see discrimination as a one note, as I call it, then you're more accepting of the information, and you're more you have the ability to empathize and to understand and to listen. And so that's why looking at intersectionality, and if you notice these, so racial identity, gender, nationality, sometimes religion, disability, sexuality, age, you know, when you pile all these on, one person could have two of these or all of them. And that will change their experience with discrimination. And so that's, like I said, that's going to be a really important word for you guys as you continue in your work. So I tried to gather some examples. So discrimination for women and the intersectionality, we can ramp this one up. So obviously women didn't become deserving of citizenship until 1920. And then it was later in 1920, of course, the right to vote came. That informed the 1960s, where it took that amount of time before a woman could open a bank account. Can you imagine trying to be in charge of yourself? Let's say you have an abusive husband. You can't even open a bank account. So that is what women have had to deal with. Then it was 1974. And I will tell you, I was in college then, so this to me doesn't feel like long ago. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed. So before that, banks would not grant credit cards to a single woman. If you had a husband, you could get a credit card. So it was refused for single women. Let's ramp it up to today. Women are paid less than men for comparable work, something like 84 cents on the dollar. Black and brown women are paid less than white women, something like 63 cents to the dollar. That's intersectionality. Is that making sense? Okay, so as I put here, imagine women of color, women who identify as queer, no matter what color they are, women with disabilities, women over 50, all of these things, you can just pile it all on and you have intersectionality. And I think the takeaway is when we hear about discrimination, we can't look at it as a one thing. That's, I think, the takeaway with this. We have to realize that these layers are real. Structural racism, indigenous peoples. We know these stories, genocide, land grabs. So in 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, which is basically, we take your land and put you on a plot. And it was called a reservation in those times. Forced sterilization. I almost didn't add this one because it's painful to hear. So in 1930, the US Bureau of Indian Affairs began sterilizing indigenous women. By 1976, 70,000 had been forcibly sterilized. This is a government action. So very recently, and Amy brought this one to my attention, I don't know how I missed it, but there's been a land transfer fight outside of Phoenix. It's been going on for a couple of years. And a group called Apache Stronghold, they had been fighting, but they lost. To prevent the transfer of their land to an Australian copper mining company. They said the transfer violated old treaties and was unhealthy for people in the area. After back and forth in the court, they'd win a little, lose a little. The bottom line is the mining company won. And the mining company rationale and the politicians who supported this say that it means jobs for the area and they don't see the harm. But once again, it builds on a theme and on a legacy of taking land from people and disadvantaging them intentionally. And when we talk about structural racism, this is what we mean when racism is legal and acceptable. Beg your pardon? I thought I heard somebody. No? Oh, okay. Racism and structural racism against Latinos. And once again, based on skin color. Since the 1840s, anti-Latino prejudice led to illegal deportations. Does this sound like something we still hear about? These things just don't seem to go away. Illegal deportation, school segregation, and lynching. So then in the 1920s, there was anti-Mexican sentiment that was so bad. 2 million people of Mexican descent were forcibly removed from this country. More than half of them were citizens of the United States. They were American citizens, but there was a fear that they were stealing American jobs because it was the time of the Great Depression. So, and a survey from the Pew Research Center shows that half of Latinos in the United States say there is too little attention on some of the racial issues that Latinos are facing. Latino residents in South San Francisco are more than twice as likely to have their mortgage application denied compared to white residents of South City. And we all know, going through the loan process, how much of it is subjective. I mean, it is supposedly about the numbers, but haven't we all known somebody who really should not have had a loan and got one? Or vice versa, someone who clearly had everything they needed, but their interest rate was inappropriate for their great credit and all these other things, their debt ratio. So that comes into play, unfortunately. And so if you look at these numbers, they tell that story. You know, too often, sometimes I think before we got to the consciousness and the awareness level, it was so easy to blame people who were actually victimized by discrimination. You know, to say, well, they don't work as hard, or this group doesn't, you know, they don't have enough education. It was a fixation on symptoms versus attention to sources of issues. You know, it's like you don't want your doctor to just look at your symptoms. You want your doctor to find causes. And so fortunately, and hats off to your city and what you guys are doing, you're going for causes. So structural racism and discrimination against Asians in the United States. In the late 19th century, the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act. This is one of the early laws that barred immigration based solely on race. And then obviously it expanded to all of Asia by 1917. Yeah, that's right. And we all remember learning of 1942 when President Roosevelt signed that executive order where Japanese I'm going to turn my video off just in case the connection is mine on my side. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
please.
Great. Okay, so yeah, I don't want to be rude about the video, but I don't want this to keep happening. So yeah, when we had the president sign that executive order to incarcerate Japanese citizens and put them in internment camps. Anti-miscegenation laws. I don't know why I have trouble with that word. It's all about interracial marriages being illegal. Heavily targeted Filipinos and criminalized interracial marriage. And
Sure.
last year,
Myra, can you pull your slides up again? Can you share your screen again?
oh, okay. They're actually showing for me.
If you go in Zoom, can you hit share screen again? You might have to
Yeah.
exit.
Perhaps the camera has to be on,
Oh, do you think so?
perhaps. I am not a wizard at this, but I'm throwing that out as a possibility.
Well, let me,
Shouldn't have to.
oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, so now you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Do you mind if I leave it on like this so I can see things a little bit better?
Sure.
No problem.
Okay, all right, because there's so much I can't see. All right, let me get to where we were. And I'm looking at the time. How much time do I have left?
Up to 20.
Okay, well, I wanted to make sure that anybody who has a comment or something to say that you feel comfortable doing that. So last year, Asian hate crimes increased 339%. I mean, what? And this is just sad, and it's heartbreaking, but clearly something has to be done about these things. Intersectionality, structural discrimination, the LGBTQ rights under attack. Oh my God, in 1950, the employment of homosexuals, and they actually use the phrase sex perverts, it was considered a threat to national security for people to work for the government if they were LGBTQ. Law enforcement discrimination and harassment continues even today based on sexual orientation and gender identity. It's a pervasive problem. More than 250 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislatures around the country, and that was last year alone. At least 43 of the bills would allow people to use religion against you as justification for discrimination, basically. In employment, between 11% and 28% of LGBTQ workers report losing a promotion simply because of sexual orientation. 27% of transgender workers report being fired, not hired, or denied promotion. You know, when we look at discrimination, I wanted to show you this because there's a cycle here. Are you guys seeing, imagine, let's just tell a little story with the cycle. Okay, so you're relegated to a neighborhood with bad schools. Let's imagine that. So then your education is challenging. Not impossible to overcome, but extra challenging. So then that means when it's time to get jobs, you're maybe not able to ascend in a way that you could have. So then you go to a bank where your resources are limited, but then the loan officer doesn't like the way you look. So if you do get a loan, your interest rate is going to be so bad, you're paying twice as much for a car or whatever you're borrowing for. You get the loan, you decide, well, now let's find a neighborhood. Well, if there's redlining going on, that realtor is going to steer you to yet another challenged neighborhood, or tell you, well, this might not be the right neighborhood for you, the one that has the good schools and the resources. So there is a condition that happens when all resources are torn away from people. When you get into the criminal justice system, it's not the same as someone who can call their best friend attorney and have things taken care of. The way judges view some people, if they are racist or prejudiced, the way police officers will prejudge or make assumptions about someone if they have a tendency to do that according to race. That's another point of victimization. We're learning increasingly that in health, good Lord, that there are doctors who can't get beyond their racism and their prejudice, and they treat patients differently, even in the prescribing of drugs and certain life-saving tests. That's a fact. So when we talk about the effects of disadvantaging some while advantaging others, this is a much bigger story than we give our attention to generally. It isn't just about, I couldn't sit at the front of the bus. Are you guys seeing the bigger picture of all of this now?
Yes.
So structural racism, intersectionality, age discrimination. Oh boy. Get a load of this one. It's legal today. It is legal for employers and prospective employers to ask your age. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that was always an impolite question. But it's actually legal. And we know there are stereotypes about aging, no matter what race you are. That one, it goes through every race, every income. There's an assumption that you're not as sharp, that somehow you're not with it. You, for whatever mysterious reason, there are some who feel like you can't contribute as you get older. Well, in 2009, the US Supreme Court made it harder for older workers who've been discriminated against to prevail in court. And then among older workers, getting hired is the most common type of discrimination. So getting past that interview and getting to being hired, 19% cite that, and then another 12% say they missed out on a promotion because of age, and 8% say they were fired or laid off because of age. And that age thing, I don't know about you guys, but it seems to get younger and younger. You know, at one point, it seemed like 60, they thought it was time to put you out to pasture. Now I hear 40s and 50s, people are considering that old and irrelevant in some circles. Now, this is often called the silent minority. The disabled experience intersectionality. Anybody want to tell me why? How does intersectionality play for someone with a disability? No one? Okay. Once again, you can be any race, or you can be disabled, Black, identify as queer. You see what I'm doing? You can age, you can add all of these things, and that experience of discrimination will be very different from someone else's. There is a stigma with the disabled. The assumptions of what a disabled person can and cannot do are ridiculous. It holds people back. And so it creates poverty, an impoverished state for people with disabilities. The majority of research on people with disabilities says that their discrimination is 9 times out of 10 related to employment. So disability-based discrimination is influenced by what people view the ability of the disabled. So it's those assumptions that people make, not bothering to learn or find out, but prejudging that someone will not be able to do certain things or understand certain things. So people with disabilities experience discrimination through attitude and structural barriers. So that's structural disadvantage and intentional disadvantage for that community. And so I thought this little unfunny cartoon was an important thing that I wanted to share with you guys. When we ignore intentional barriers to equity, we are creating more disadvantage, whether we intend to do that or not. Our lack of awareness leads us to contribute to the problem, even if we don't want to. And when we're dealing with, it's either individual actions, institutions, government policies, being mindful of this is the way for us to really begin and to address it. And I put on there, I trip you and then I blame you for falling. It's kind of what I was saying earlier about, let's get it right. Let's not only look at the results of these things, let's look at the causes. Now, I don't want anyone to leave this meeting and think every Black family has never been a landowner, every Latino family, every Asian family, every indigenous, every older white person is this. We don't want to leave this meeting with more assumptions. So I wanted to bring some slides on progress. Now, to say that African Americans were enslaved, 400 years ago, 1 in 50 Black families are now millionaires. And that number is a couple years old, so it's probably more than that now. Women now hold executive level jobs and more than nearly 30% of corporate board seats. Those are the seats that pay the bucks, corporate board seats. Indigenous people, the gaming industry is a $16 billion industry, and there are people benefiting. June 26, 2015, the US Supreme Court struck down state bans on same-sex marriage, legalized it in all 50 states, and required states to honor out-of-state same-sex marriages. 2015 took a long time. While 36% of whites, 23% of Blacks, and 16% of Latinos have a bachelor's degree or more, 54% of Asians do. And 14% of whites have advanced degrees. 21% of Asian Americans have advanced degrees. Let me give you a little more progress. Legislation has been introduced and it's in the Senate now waiting for their decision, but it's passed through the House, Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination. It's the Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act and Protect Older Job Applicants Act of 2021. And look at this one. In 2021, nearly 20% of persons with disability were employed. That's up from just 1 year before of 17.9%. That's by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Things are happening. What you're doing is contributing to that. I mean, you've gotten on the train of courage, of trying to create opportunities, of trying to address those things that are really tough to speak about and to want to hear about. But we can't put our heads in the sand. The progress has been, I call it each one reached one. The civil rights movement had help from white, Latino, indigenous, LGBT, every community in the world helped the civil rights movement. If it weren't for the Jewish community, there never would have been an NAACP. The way that we advance is by working together. It's the collective spirit and the power of so many people working together. So the progress that I just showed you, it's because of kind, courageous people who helped, who decided to help. If you have a few minutes and you want to share, how do you think that in the midst of all of what I just showed you, that you guys in your role can make positive change? What do you think that you can do? And I'm going to get off of the slides now. I'm going to stop the share so I can see you mainly.
I think being tolerant of people's differences would be one, and education, willing to kind of dig deep and get an understanding of what people are going through, because each person has a unique life experience.
Yeah, it's thinking bigger, isn't it?
It is. Being willing to think outside the box, and we all are within our own box, and we all have a different box.
We do. In your role, you're going to hear a lot of things. It's my understanding that you will be doing a lot of reviews. And so tell me, do you think that some of what I presented is going to help in terms of how you receive some of the things that you will?
I think so, yes.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. I was hoping so.
Myra,
Yes.
hi, it's
Hi.
Jasmine. What would help me would be to have seen references and footnotes in every slide that you presented. Coming from the R&D world, our presentation is never credible unless we have references, because we need to distinguish between anecdotal data
Yes.
from evidence-based data. And I did not see any references on your slides, and I would have liked to see
Yeah.
that, because slide number 28, for example, I did not know it is currently legal for employers and prospective employers to ask your age as well as your graduation date. That's new information for me, because when I went through job seeking skills, the first thing you learned was what employers may or may not ask you as a potential employer, as an applicant. So this particular piece of information is very new to me, and it piqued my curiosity. So
yeah, that came straight from a government site where
I would like to see references on each of your slides, because you presented some very heavy statistics here. And I would like to read more deeply into those statistics so that I can be made more credible to myself in making a presentation or in saying X, Y, and Z and ABC.
That's a great point. I can go back. You saw where I put Pew Research Center on some, and I put the US government on some. I can add it to the others and get that to Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just didn't want to weigh the slides down, but I can definitely, I had it on some, but I didn't have it on all of them, but I can definitely get that to Amy.
Thank you.
Oh, for sure.
Otherwise, thank you for all this information. It has really helped me to understand more fully the challenges looming overhead for us. Not a bad thing, but thank you.
No, I know it's all so big, but you know, we all do what we can, right? We take it bit by bit. But as I said in the beginning, awareness is a funny thing. Once you have it, you don't lose it. And I think awareness really helps us all in our different walks of life and what we do.
Yes, and I have one more comment. You asked a question about how you think this would help us. And I just want to say that for me, perception is reality. And one of the things I've learned as a medical scientist is in dealing with a variety of stakeholders is really not to manage them, but how to learn to manage expectations. Perception is an expectation, and it is a reality. So for me, it is very important for me to understand what these perceptions are. So you have opened my eyes to some of them.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, that gives me something to think about as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, I want to give you guys your time back, and thank you so much for accepting me, paying attention to this. I really appreciate it, and I hope that it gave you something to think about.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you so much, Myra Jolivet, for being here and the wonderful presentation that you put together. And again, we're definitely gonna reference back to it, I'm sure, and as we're moving forward and just, trying to piece together what we're gonna be doing in the future. So thank you so much for giving us a nice overview of basics of how to just make sure we're being equitable in our meetings and towards the public. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, and thank you so much for your time. And again, the best of luck to you guys in your work. I'll sign off now. Bye-bye.
Oh, perfect. So I think with that, again, if anybody has any other comments or anything, I'm sure that we can also discuss that or have conversation about that in the future. I think it's probably a good time for the next line item, which is a recess. We're going to take a short break of 5 minutes and then return to the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, Crystal.
Sure.
By a break time.
Yeah, definitely a break time. So about 5 minutes. Let's get back at 7:07. If everybody's okay with that.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Perfect. Thank you, Amy. So we're just returning back from a little recess. We're going to continue on with the agenda. And I believe the next line item is the presentation on South San Francisco Racial and Social Equity Action Plan. And Amy, you'll assist us with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Okay, can everyone see it all right?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So I know before our first meeting, I had sent you all the action plan. I just wanted to continue to help you digest it. It's pretty long. There's a lot of different goals and strategies and implementation actions in there. I recommend that you all continue to get familiar with this plan. I think it's really important to build on the work of the previous commission and advance what's already been started. I think understanding what has already been done can also inform your work plan and what you're interested in working on. And there's just a lot in the plan. So I just made a short presentation to just go over some of the big programs and introduce them to you all so you all are familiar with this work that's been being done. This action plan was accepted by Council last August 2021. So as we had discussed at the last meeting, this Commission on Racial and Social Equity was tasked to meet for 1 year. There are 14 commissioners. They culminated in a final report and Racial and Social Equity Action Plan. 2 management fellows were brought on to implement the plan. I'm one of those 2 fellows. Hopefully you'll hear from the other one soon. And part of the plan is this Commission on Equity and Public Safety. There's 4 main goals to the action plan. Each goal has a set of strategies and we'll go through them one by one. So the main goals, the first one's around ongoing oversight and accountability. The second is ensuring the safety of community members of color in criminal justice policies. The third is targeting resources and support. And the fourth goal is around ensuring local land use planning increases access to resources. So for the first goal of ongoing oversight, strategy 1.1, the first strategy was having a dedicated staff position or an equity and inclusion officer. So far, the city has completed this goal by hiring the management fellows. In progress, the city is working on creating a formal position for the equity and inclusion officer. In progress will also be more DEI training for city staff. Elements of this strategy and this goal that are still to do include conversations and listening sessions with the community. This would actually, I think, be a good thing to partner with the commission on because this commission has that community focus. So the officer could work with the commission, you all, to host these listening sessions together. Some of the other implementation actions recommended included doing a racial equity audit of practices and policies and getting more data from departments, equity-related data. This is another point that I think the commission can help with because you all are tasked to look at data. So together you can be working on these equity initiatives. The second goal is ensuring the safety of community members of color in criminal justice policies. Strategy 2.1 is a community wellness and crisis response team. This is a mental health clinician that is actually embedded in the police department. Our clinician has been on board and responding to calls since, I believe, last December, which is really exciting. I think you all might be interested in getting a presentation from her to see how this program has been advancing. There was an MOU for the program between the city and the county. There's a few cities involved in this program, each having their own mental health clinician. And in progress, the Gardner Center at Stanford is going to evaluate this program. The second strategy of the second goal was what they referred to as the Community Equity and Safety Advisory Board, which we've updated to the Commission on Equity and Public Safety. You all have begun to meet. This is great. We're completing the action plan. Things that are still in progress. The action plan had asked for this commission to draft bylaws with an equity lens. I've began drafting these bylaws and will present to you all at a future meeting. And actually making the recommendations is something that this commission is still working on. Things that are still to do on this goal is leading those community conversations and is looking at public safety policies. One specific one that was called out in the action plan was looking at policies regarding youth in the criminal justice system. So this may be another issue that you all would care to include in the work plan and include in the plans to address in your first year. Goal 2, strategy 2.3 involves the Community Emergency Response Team. This is a volunteer team that is trained on disaster preparedness. The action plan asks that the CERT team coordinate with the Promotorious Program. I'll explain what the Promotorious Program is in a couple of slides. It's community outreach workers. There's still some things to do to achieve the CERT component of the plan. These include coordinating conversations, ideally with this commission, to talk with the community about emergency preparedness, and also to provide information on CERT through the library. On to goal 3. This goal is around targeting resources. The first strategy is the Promotorious Program. Promotorious is community health workers in Spanish. Our program involves bilingual staff going into communities to connect residents with resources. They don't only connect with health-related resources, they can also give food assistance, rental assistance, job training services, and can connect residents with any resources that they're in need of. They have been hired and trained and have been on board since March, going out into the communities and helping residents access resources. It's a really great program. If you all are interested, they can come present at a future meeting. They are doing their thing, opening and closing cases, and there will be some evaluation of the program. Okay, I know there's a lot. I'm going to keep running through. Feel free if you have questions, maybe we'll bring them up at the end. Strategy 3.2 has to do with economic opportunities. This is another great, really impactful program that has come out of this action plan. The city opened an economic advancement center downtown that gives workforce development and small business services. The city has also started a guaranteed income program, which is functioning now. Strategy 3.3 had to do with housing insecurity. A lot of these components of the plan have been are ongoing and are providing services to the community. There's renter assistance, housing funds, and home repair programs, among others. Educational resources include the library is getting diverse books to the public. There's an internship program. We converted the Youth Advisory Council to the Youth Commission. In progress, there's childcare initiatives. Still needs to be done is initiatives with the school district. And lastly, goal 4 is around land use planning. Strategy 4.1 is leverage land assets for affordable housing. Actions that have been completed are offering former redevelopment agency land to affordable housing developers, aligning priorities with the general plan and the housing element. These are 2 important planning documents. And still to be done is to work with the school district to leverage school district assets. That is a brief summary of the plan. Again, I encourage you to read it in detail, be familiar with it, be familiar with these major programs that have been happening. I hope any recommendations this commission makes can build on these programs and also look into new areas. Any questions about the plan?
I have
On the-
several. I'll let others go first.
Oh, on the first slide, what is an MOU?
Oh, sorry about that. That's a memorandum of understanding. It's essentially just language between the county and the city talking about the program and how costs for the program will be split and information like that.
Okay, thank you.
And then I think Commissioner Flores had a comment or question.
I have several. Some are comments, some are questions. Will we have access to the clinicians' data in terms of the cases that she's attended to, or the types of cases called and rejected or closed and open from December to the present time?
Yes, she has been publishing reports. I can look into and see if I can send you all some. And then also, if you're interested, we can invite her to a future meeting and get a presentation on how the program's been going.
That'd be great.
Because I would like to see a spreadsheet in terms of what she has actually accepted as bona fide calls and what have been rejected as not so bona fide outside of her scope of work. My next question is, what is Stanford's Gardner Center?
I think it's a research center at the university.
Oh, okay, because one of the slides talked about partnering with them. So why would we partner with them?
Oh, sorry if that was unclear. That is part of the Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team program design. It's with the county, and then there's 4 cities participating. Each city has their own mental health clinician. The costs are split between the city and the county. And there's this added piece of it's going to be evaluated by this research center at Stanford, which is great. The program is also a pilot program right now. So there is potential to, add more to the program in the future if that's what the data indicates. And if that's the decision, I think this commission could also probably have a role in influencing what that program looks like after the end of the pilot period.
So you mean their program is similar to the one after which this council has been predicated? I'm referring to the one in Medford, Oregon. Are we talking about the same pilots?
I'm not familiar with that pilot.
That's the predicate of this program, where there was a clinician that was hired and hooked into the police department, and the evaluation was that the presence of such clinician definitely took a huge load that was found to not be so relevant to law enforcement, but rather more relevant to mental health. There's Eddie, are you online? If you are online, help me the name of that program, or even Mayor Mark Nagalis, you'd mentioned it to me.
Hi, this is Mike Futrell. I believe you're talking about the Cahoots program.
Cahoots program, yeah.
There we go.
Yes. Yeah, this is Mayor
Thank you.
Nagalis. I think you're also referring to the Cahoots program. Yes, that's correct.
So Amy, is the Cahoots program and this Gardner Center program, this pilot project, are they similar?
I think
Let me try, Amy.
Sure.
We aspire, I think, to the Cahoots program, which is a very mature program that's been in place for many years.
Great.
So we are getting started and heading in that direction, because I agree with you. The results from that program are pretty amazing.
Yes.
So we do hope to get there sooner rather than later, I hope.
Yes, I'm excited by that, because the first time I read about them, I thought this is very relevant. I would absolutely love to have someone from them speak to us, to put it on our to-do, or on our aspiration list of to-dos. And then my next question is on slide 6, you said, examine public safety policies and services, including regarding youth in the criminal justice system. What does that mean, including regarding youth in the criminal justice system?
I think one of the things that the prior commission hoped this commission would look at is policies around youth in the criminal justice system. So when are kids getting in trouble at school, or stopped or arrested and getting into the criminal justice system, and what are ways to keep youth out of the criminal justice system?
Oh, okay, because when I first read this, I thought, that did not even cross my mind. My first thought was, you mean including youth as interns in the criminal justice system? And I thought, wow, that's so progressive. I'm sorry. Okay, so slide 7, I did not understand what you meant by under to do, the second bullet, provide information through the library.
Yep, I think that was the community emergency response team. And the implementation action in the plan just said, do more outreach, make sure diverse community members are aware that there's this team, that you can volunteer for it, making sure there's diversity in the volunteers on the team, and providing information through the library is part of that.
So you mean the library would warehouse the information and they would catalog the reports? I didn't quite understand the role of the library system.
I think it was more of a display.
Oh, okay, to showcase accomplishment.
Yes, and just,
okay, that makes sense to me. And then on slide 9, I just want to give a huge shout out to the EAC. I've spoken with them and I've attended their workshops. They're so amazing. And I think they're doing phenomenal things for so many people, because I know a lot of would-be entrepreneurs who are trying to engage in a cottage industry. So it's so amazing that EAC is available to them, including hands-on help with licenses and permits and all that. And slide 10, I would like to understand, and I'm sure this is very fluid and it can change, because I spoke to a real estate broker about this today, and she was as, what should I say, befuddled as I, because I've been trying to define, quote, affordable housing for months. And having attended many council meetings and just listening to these contractors and these presenters and these condo people saying, oh yes, we're going to do 15% for affordable housing. And then I called them and I said, well, what exactly does affordable housing mean? So no one has really been able to give me a clear definition where I can tell you with confidence the meaning of that. So I'm not asking you to define that for me. I just wanted you to know my confusion. And that's it on my list. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your engagement.
Thank you, Commissioner Flores. I think, I wonder if there's any way that we can get the Youth Commission involved in one of those things about the youth and them involved in the criminal justice system. I'm actually also curious if there's any relation, and maybe it's worthwhile even just finding out the data that that Myra had just presented with the data about kids getting suspended. I'm curious to know if there's any connection with that in the criminal justice system for our youth. So I think that's just like a little side question, but.
Great point, Crystal. I agree with you. I support that. I support that curiosity.
Yeah.
Amy, I'm not the staff liaison with the Youth Commission, but I attend a lot of their meetings, and I think I was thinking the same thing. I was going to talk to Amy tomorrow and say there's a bit of overlap there with the Youth Commission, and I'm sure they'd be really interested in that issue. You know, just one thing I'd say about the juvenile justice system is just before COVID, the county of San Mateo embarked on a study called the study. It was a study for children's success, and one of the indicators that they looked at was the rate of incarceration among each community's youth in San Mateo County, and South San Francisco is disproportionately represented. So what I mean by that, like, let's say we're 10% of the population, maybe 15% of the kids that go to juvenile hall are from South San Francisco. So they identified South San Francisco as a community of concern. That was one of the indicators. And so it's you know, very much a concern in San Mateo County. To address that, like, we should be equally, we shouldn't be represented at all. But if there's going to be kids going, you know, in the juvenile system, it should be representative of what percent we are in the population. And if it's higher than that, you have to wonder what's going on there. So that is definitely a concern.
Thank you for that, Sharon. And if it's okay, if I point them out, I think Mary Jo is on the call.
Yes, I was just about to say I staff the Youth Commission along with Tamiko Huey. And if you have any inquiries, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat and we can chat more about reaching out to the commission.
Thank you so much, Mary Jo. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely think we need to partner up on some things, and especially for data collection or just data in general. Perfect. And any other comments, questions? Thank you so much, Amy, for that presentation and going over the work plan. I know we have like a lot of work cut up for us, so thank you so much for just presenting that for now. So with all of that in mind, I think we'll go on to the next line item, which is discussion regarding the drafting the commission work plan. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. So this slide, I just wrote down some of the suggestions you all had last time on topics that you're interested in. This would be a good time to recommend things that you would like to achieve in the first year, to bring up things that you'd like on future agendas. We've already mentioned a few things that you're all interested in. Mary Jo and I are taking notes, and we will make sure to add those. We can take notes on any suggestions you give now and draft a work plan and return it to you all for review. Yeah, I'd like to step back and allow the chair to talk with you all about your ideas for the work plan.
Thank you, Amy. So as Amy said, so these are all the ideas that we had come up with when we were just kind of, you know, shooting out things that we definitely wanted to look at. Now that it's been about a month or so, just wanted to check in with everybody to see if anything else had come up with the training that we just had. Do you guys have any other thoughts, anything that we need to add or change, and kind of see where we're at with this? And again, this is a discussion, so feel free to jump in.
I have two questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner
Okay.
Flores.
So the first question is on the second bullet under work plan, equity, lens, and development. What kind of development? What do you mean? You mean the council development or growth and development in general? What?
I think this point was from Commissioner Sanders talking about development at Oyster Point and using an equity lens to look at future development of buildings, businesses in the city.
Yes.
So geographical development of South City. land use. Right?
I would say that's pretty accurate. You know, land use for the public versus commercial.
Got it. Oh, yes, I recall that discussion. Yes. So perhaps we should put their South City SSF geographical development, land development. And my second question is, in our first meeting, you did ask us what our interests and priorities would be. So I would like to turn that around to the city, to the leaders, the people in positions of leadership at the level of governance, and ask them what their perception would be in terms of priority to-dos in South San Francisco. Because after all, you've had more time and experience than we have collectively because we're such a new council. But certainly many of you people in positions of leadership have already accepted phone calls and complaints and lamentations, and you have probably made notes and reports. So I just would like to know what your top 3 perceptions would be as priorities, if you were to give us direction.
Mike, you might want to jump in here because I think there's 3 of us here, and that would be a little concern about Brown Act. So, or maybe staff.
That was also my concern. You're right.
So I'm
Sure.
gonna be quiet now.
Top priorities. I do think the mental health program should be a priority.
Okay.
I think too, looking at the policing and the data on emergency calls, I think there's some great work to be done this year in understanding that and then presenting it to the community in a transparent way that would be meaningful, and that might also, I'm not sure, but it might also ferret out some information that would lead to action. And I say that's an issue this year because of a new state law requiring the police this year to start collecting a great deal of data that heretofore we have not collected. So understanding how to present that, I think, will be beneficial to the community. And probably the trainings, reviewing that, and that would dovetail as well into our school liaison officer agreement that we just concluded with the school district, which also has a training requirement for school liaison officers. So again, all 3 of those areas would cross over into ongoing work and be beneficial on many levels. And that's not to say that equity lens on development or other items are not worthy. And I would encourage those in the commission to speak up and pursue their passions, because typically if you work on a project you're passionate about, you may have a not a better outcome, but certainly a more rewarding experience. But from a city perspective, given what's happening around us, understanding and working with the data that police have just started collecting, the training aspect, because again of the SLO, and there's a need for that. And then third would be continued work with the mental health clinician program, because we need to decide next steps. Let's assume, and I think we will, let's assume we conclude that the pilot program is successful. Well, what next? And what will that look like? And what are the milestones, if you will, to get us to that CAHOOTS model? So just my suggestions, but it's up to the commission, of course.
So Mike, thank you for your response to my inquiry. I love it. And I'm particularly titillated by number 2 and very much look forward to your operationalization of that, the policing emergency calls data and presentation. That's so relevant to everybody.
And thank you so much, because to hear everything you said, they made me happy, because that's what I'm looking for, to make something to know about the mental health problem in the community. I'm so happy, to hear that. Thank you.
I feel like with the data on emergency calls, I don't know if people know this, but 988 has just gone live.
Mhm.
And for people who don't know what 988 is, it is the new national call center for people who are in a mental health crisis. And so rather than calling the police when somebody's in a mental health crisis, they're really trying to push out 988 to be called, because then it gets you directly linked to suicide hotline prevention and a crisis team. So I'm really interested in trying to find out when those calls do go through 988 and they usually get bumped to behavioral health or whatever county or city that they're in, like who will 988 forward those calls to? Would it just be, South San Francisco police directly, or will it be sent over to behavioral health? I'm not quite sure if the city has prepared for 988 or even the county at that, but it'll be really interesting. I'm sure that we'll probably have to try to gather data from 988. So I don't know if that's worth maybe putting down on trying to see if we can get that data, and just in case because those calls won't come through South San Francisco PD.
Crystal, this is the first I've heard of 988, so I am very interested in learning further about it, because like you, I wish to know how they would triage this. Is 988 a national number, and then they go through state, regional, local, neighborhood? How
Right.
exciting.
Right, yeah, so it is a national hotline, and they have a huge database. There's lots of city officials were part of. It's been like a year in the making, I think it was, when we first started hearing of it. So I do know that they have every city, county behavioral health contact information now, but if that gets routed to behavioral health or to local law enforcement, I'm not quite sure. I don't even know if it's either local law enforcement or county sheriffs. I'm not quite sure which one they route the calls to, depending on the nature of the call.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other comments, questions? I definitely like Commissioner Flores, your question to our already, city officials who are on this line. So I definitely want to give the ones who can speak an opportunity to comment or bring anything up.
Crystal, we can't because it'll be a Brown Act violation.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, Crystal. Sharon Reynolds here. I agree with certainly what Mike's top three are. I would just mention a couple of more. I'm tend to be more focused on operational issues here in South San Francisco, and I just think internally looking at our recruitments and how to what extent our staff is representative of the community is something that we want to work on. And I would also say just equitable programming. So sort of the distribution of resources when we're planning programs or capital improvements, and the way in which we get public input for those programs and public improvements is really important. So, we're going through for example, our swimming pool, many meetings right now, and trying to get a balanced view of representing all kinds of interests and all the demographics, and not just one interest group or another, or one specialty group, those kinds of things. So those are some of the kinds of equity issues that are high on, that I prioritize as we do our daily work.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for that. We'll definitely notate that as well. I feel like that's important as well.
Yeah. If I may, Chair Cancino, just Thank you. I just, I'm not even sure where I saw. I think it was one of the strategies from the slides that Amy provided to us. I recall reading something where it's my understanding as a board or as one of the commissioners were to connect with the community with community-based organizations and networks. That to me would imply that we were actually out in the public somewhere, interacting with the community. And am I getting that right, Amy?
Can you remind me which slide?
No, I don't believe it was one of the slides you presented today. It was, I took it upon myself to kind of go through that large number of slides that you provided early on. And I believe it to be one of the strategies. And it just kind of stuck out in my head that, okay, if there's this expectation that we're to connect with, quote, community-based organization and networks, do we do that individually? Are we doing that as a group? And then it also says that we're to keep the community abreast of our progress on social media. Who's in charge of that?
I think that would be a task for the commission as a whole. Definitely, as we've discussed, this is intended to be a community space. And once, everyone's got their bearings, I think we can do more outreach and bring more community members to these meetings. That can include working with these community-based organizations. I'd also recommend we add to the work plan the idea of these listening sessions that we've talked about. Maybe target for the fall if y'all are feeling ready by then, or push back if not yet. But to, start having more people in meetings, working more closely with other community organizations, and, working on that function for the commission.
I'll just jump in here and definitely agree with what Amy's saying. It's not unlike any of our other commissions that have a focus. So if you're a park and recreation commissioner, the public knows that you're on the commission. And if they have concerns, they can communicate them through you. You're sort of the conduit, all the commissions are, to staff and to council. So council can't hear every single complaint and every single issue, but we filter those. People will kind of go through the commissions and summarize to council level. I think the more out and about you are, like as you attend events and you attend functions and you're volunteering, and you guys were selected because you're such great community members. Some of that is organic, some of that sort of grows organically, and then as Amy said, we'll try and create opportunities as well, but definitely on the social media front, that's definitely a staff function. So we really want to have that channel through staff as opposed to commissioners like shooting out emails about this or that, or doing postings. That is something that you would want to is on our communications department, and for staff to make sure that it's coordinated and that we're putting out accurate information and we have the right date and those kind of things.
So I have a question around that. So it's not outside of the ordinary, because as I live in my neighborhood, I'm like, well, and I speak to my neighbors, I'm like, is it appropriate for me to say, hey, I'm on the South Sea Fairness and Public Safety Equity Commission. If you have any concerns, feel free to come and talk to me, and how, what would be the appropriate way to kind of, without appearing or appealing to seem like I'm campaigning.
I definitely think it's appropriate to let people know you're serving on the commission, and another opportunity is they can come and make a public comment here at this meeting if they're comfortable doing that. And so both of those ways of just communicating with you informally, or again, coming to this body and making a comment. I think those are both very appropriate.
Thank you.
My question is to Sharon and Amy. I do agree that the public, that we would anticipate the public making comment at our meetings. My question would be, though, how do you propose that we showcase our council to heighten awareness of our presence. Is there such a thing as, I guess I'm talking about marketing, but would you be thinking of something like a virtual open house where you do an email blast to every email person in South City and say, hey, this is new, this is happening, they've met twice, here is your council, come meet them, join them on Zoom at such and such with your questions.
Yes, I think that could certainly happen. I've already seen quite a bit of publicity about this commission, which I think is great. And I think you'll see more, especially as you find your rhythm and your agendas become a little more formal in terms of the work plan that you have. So I definitely think the city will do outreach, and exactly as you say, we have different email groups. There's a citywide email group, and then there's a lot of departmental email groups where people just have self-selected and said, yes, I'd like to hear more about that. And then we also put out things in the mail. So I think there's lots of opportunity to share what this commission's doing with the public. And those are all great suggestions.
I feel like we also need to go back to like the work plan, because there are things to do on the previous work plan that the previous commission had put together. And some of those included youth conversations, community conversations. And I feel like if, just by nature, us doing the work that we're going to be doing, we're going to be talking with the public regardless, and at some point when the public does start coming and bringing their questions, their concerns to us, we'll definitely be interacting with the public a lot. I think if we follow the work plan that was outlined already, by nature, we are going to have so many conversations and discussions with the public. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that is also kind of up to us to figure out how do we want to do that, and what the strategic planning around having community conversations would look like, and when, and how to best utilize those conversations with like certain events that might already be happening in the city. So I think that would probably be a good thing. Is that something that would be okay to do? That's my question, I think.
Yes, I definitely think so. And I think there'll be more interaction with departments. For example, we're having concert in the park in September, and there'll be departmental booths, and we'll certainly let the commission know about that. And you may want to be there, be represented. So I agree with you. There are some things from the previous commission that you'll want to take action on, and we'll do our very best on the staff side to collaborate, like, oh, this is something the commission might be interested in, or there's a role here. So we definitely want to hear from you all, what your thoughts are, if you have suggestions of ways you'd like to engage. And then I think staff will bring some forward as well.
In thinking methodically about this, I think that before we have any chit chat with our constituents, our fellow residents, we must have the confidence that we know what we're going to be doing. And I think that's what the work plan is all about, where we're prioritizing our to-dos. And if we do have these 3 bullet points under work plan, perhaps because there's 7 of us, if 1 or 2 of us had an interest in one of these, perhaps we could begin to create working groups of 1, 2, or 3 people, and we could belong to more than one bullet point, for example. But I think we need to start honing in on how do we start to operationalize these 3 bullet points.
Well, I think our city manager had brought that up, like people who are really interested in certain things, let's go through with that passion already. Because you already have an interest, you might already have knowledge about it. So I definitely like your idea about having like a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee or something like that, where people can get together and talk about it and figure out what that work plan looks like for these bullet points. But yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, Commissioner Flores, like trying to figure out where everybody's at. And I think it's been very apparent mental health is definitely my thing. So I could start that conversation. How do people feel about that, having like a subcommittee?
I think that's a good idea, definitely.
I agree. I just don't want to violate the Brown Act.
With the Brown Act, what was the number, Amy? Is it 5 or 4?
I think the quorum is 4, so it'd have to be 3 or fewer people.
Okay, perfect.
We might want to agendize formation of subcommittees, maybe for the next meeting, just so that it's advertised as such on the agenda, just to make it clear if people, anybody on the public wants to speak to that, and it would be good to put it on the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon.
Mhm.
So we could definitely put that on the agenda, talking about subcommittees or ad hoc committees moving forward.
Before we move on from this item, I just wanted to add a couple more suggestions. I think there's been a couple comments interested in housing, affordable housing. We could get a presentation from Economic and Community Development on their affordable housing initiatives, if people are interested in that. I also just wanted to share on this slide where it says trainings. These are the trainings left to do. We had the Brown Act, then today we had structural racism and intersectionality. Remaining trainings for this commission include employee relations laws, stuff from the PD, stuff from fire, and sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. The chair had identified a need for training here. I also just wanted to share, I think maybe the next meeting would be a good time to do the training on employee relations laws and to talk about the complaint process, because that's another function of this commission that we haven't gone into in depth yet. So I'd like to add that to the work plan for the next meeting, if that's okay with you all, to get familiar with that complaint process and how that can work. And then I just wanted to say, we were invited to look at the public arts master plan and do a kind of focus group with the Parks and Rec department. So if that's okay with you all, I'd like to add that in as well. I've been seeing nods on the past 2 things. Lastly,
That would be great.
Awesome. Great, thanks. I'll let them know. Lastly, I just want to say, I think it'd be good for us to finalize the work plan for the next year in the next couple of meetings. So I'll take all your feedback from today, put it into a document, send it back to you all. And I think we should try and really get something that's like a final document that we can refer to throughout the year. Thank you.
Amy. Any last comments, questions, concerns? Just getting a read from the room. All right. So let's move on to the next line item here, which is discussion and potential action on approving guiding language for the Equity Commission. Amy? Perfect.
So just to introduce this, I just took all your feedback from our first meeting on guiding language, including mission, vision, group agreements, guiding principles, and put these on the slides. I would like to know if you all would continue, if you have any further edits that you would still like to make, or if you feel good about these as they are now. As Sharon had said last time, we can continue to revise them in the future if you like. And these can feed into our bylaws, which I can also share drafts with you all. So yeah, I'll open to your feedback, or if people are ready to approve these items, we can maybe read them one by one and then take a motion at the end to approve them all, if you so desire.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. Give everybody like a minute to read it. Cool. Any edits? Yes, no, yes, no.
No.
No, okay. So I think, Amy, from here, is this where we would make a motion for this now, or is that for something after or now?
I'm not sure what we have to do. I thought it might be easier to do one motion at the end, but Sharon, what do you think? Should we do this one by one?
I think it would be good, just to kind of that the commission endorsed this. And again, as Amy said, it doesn't mean it's written in stone. I think over time, if you want to change it in the future, you could, but I think it would be good to sort of have the commission's buy-in or endorsement.
Sharon, do you think we can approve them all together, or should we go one by one and take a roll call vote on each? There's a few slides.
How many slides do you have, Amy?
5.
What does the chair think? What's the will of the, I think you could do it either way.
Ooh, there's 5. I mean, should we view all 5? Maybe we should view all 5. Maybe I spoke too soon, but
We just go through one at a time.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. If that's okay.
Can we move on to the next one then, Amy? Perfect. Thank you.
On the third line, where it says promote social equity, I don't know, promote social equality and equity.
What slide are we on?
Vision.
We're on vision. You're saying like where Commissioner Hobson and Court, you're saying where it says including race and equity and sexual orientation and gender identity and expression? Is that where you're saying that?
Oh, it's on it says on the second line, another oppressions and promote social
Equity. Oh, okay, perfect.
equality and equity, or equity and equality.
Yeah, I like Paula's suggestion, especially having learned there was a difference between equity and equality. I really didn't see the difference till that slide with the bicycles just made it clear to me. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I totally
Exactly.
get it. But now I know to use the correct word with the situation. Whereas prior to today, I probably would have used the word interchangeably, honestly. But now that I'm informed, I now know I need to use a specific word for a particular situation. So I wholeheartedly agree. We should add the words and equality to that sentence.
So I would like to suggest that after and other oppressions, eliminate that comma and continue that sentence to say and other oppressions to foster social equity and equality.
I like that.
Because we're not really promoting what does not exist. So we're addressing structural racism, etc., to foster social equity and equality.
Yeah, I like that.
And there are too many ands in the second sentence, including race, comma, equity. I mean, this whole thing is about equity. So we should just say anti-oppression concepts and strategies, including race, comma, sexual orientation, comma, gender identity, comma, and expression. That word equity seems like a sore thumb to me in that sentence.
Yeah. What were we trying to say there with the word equity there?
I think just anti-oppression concepts, race and equity, is just, I guess, a way to address wanting to look at policies and programs that apply an equity lens to racial disparities. I think the point of this sentence was the trainings, to provide government with trainings. And I think this was your suggestion, Chair, and also trainings for community-based organizations. So just making sure that they have been trained on, similar to training we went through, structural racism, race and equity, and then SOGI.
Right. I wonder if it would be okay to just put, oh, I don't know, to just put SOGI, but I don't think we can. Not quite sure. Yeah.
I think we need to work on this slide because it reads very awkwardly. And what we're trying to do is redo each sentence when we really should redo the entire vision. So this slide as it reads is you're talking about vision and then you're talking about why you have the vision. Vision is your intent and you do not have to rationalize the intent. And I mean, because that's a different slide. So you have background, you have vision, you have intent, and we do not have to say this will contribute to a community in which all residents with marginalized identities, blah, blah, blah. That's repetitive because we've already spoken about fostering social equity by proactively addressing racism, ageism, sexism, misogyny, etc., and other forms of oppression.
Right. I think for this though, when I initially had brought that up, it was so that it was mandatory. These trainings were mandatory for government officials, for government funded organizations and clinics. That it was like mandatory trainings.
And that would fall under methodology. So vision is our intent, and the trainings fall under methodology in terms of how we are going to approach or operationalize our vision. I'm just looking at this as a business plan.
Yeah, because maybe I'm starting to see what you're talking about, because that first sentence actually covers that that second sentence.
And I think the first sentence should start with, because it's our vision, it should start with to foster social equity and equality by proactively addressing these forms of oppression that we have already listed, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's nice.
The methodology suggested to proactively address these issues include blah, blah, blah. That's it. And again, that last sentence is repetitive because that's exactly what equity means. We want the disenfranchised community to have resources that are tailored to them. I think we now fully understand the distinction between equality and equity.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this one definitely needs a little more editing for sure. Does anybody have any suggestions on that? Listening to all this?
I'm wondering if we maybe just want to step through the 5 slides and then see if there's, you want to edit, take something off of one slide and put it on another, or maybe just kind of step through them because it depends on what's on the next 3, I think, to edit each one. Would that be helpful? I mean, maybe just kind of go through them and then you can decide if there's 1 or 2 you want to edit or rewrite, or maybe all of them. I don't know.
Great suggestion, Sharon. Thank you so much. Yeah. Maybe let's just go through them for now and
Come
and
back.
then, and then come back to comb through it. Cool, perfect.
Are we doing this now, or are we doing it later and then giving our suggestions? And how do you want to do this?
I think we should go through it now just so we can
Okay.
get like the overview down. I mean, if there's notes, I mean, if you could take notes, and then once we go back through it, definitely comb through it, but it'll probably be good just to kind of see what are like how it is kind of broken apart so that we could maybe plug and play or, put things wherever they need to be that don't really fit. Like the suggestion that you had made earlier, Commissioner Flores.
Yes.
Yeah, like that. So group agreements.
Is it helpful, maybe Chair, do you want to read them out?
Yeah, I can read them out. That's fine. So group agreements focus on our common goal, build and strengthen partnerships and community relationships, be open to new ideas and perspectives, participate and be self-aware, be prepared for uncomfortable conversations, calling in versus calling out, acknowledge intent, address impacts. Perfect. Let's go on to the next one. The guiding principles. Recognize oppressions, including but not limited to systemic racism, ageism, sexism, and all social inequities, support learning and innovation, promote transparency, focus on action and systems change, value improvement in process and procedure towards change. Levers of change framework. Programs, the services provided, policies, regulations, institutional procedures, how resources are distributed, targeted to neighborhoods and residents, practices, approach, and culture, how services are provided, when, why, and how community engagement happens, recruitment, hiring, and professional development, and then the processes, internal procedures related to programs and policies.
Just to clarify, the levers of change framework is the idea on how change happens. How do we get more equity in government? It's through looking at programs, policies, practices, processes.
So I think that training, just because I'm gonna forget, but I think that training piece would probably have to come here. We can, right? Like, yeah, I think it probably makes more sense here. Do you agree with me on that? Anybody?
So I'm not, this whole framework here is very foreign to me. When I look at a plan, I look at it as a business plan or in health education, an MBA program, it's called the business plan. In a health education program in public health, it's called program planning. And usually the beginning is background and rationale, and then the mission and vision, and then methodology, and then evaluation. So these are a mishmash of all of that to me. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be judgmental or critical. It's just that my mind thinks in a very methodical way, and those are the outlines that I've grown up with professionally.
Yeah, well, I mean, we definitely want it to make sense. I mean, if it doesn't make sense to us, then it might not make sense to the public. So if we can edit things so that it makes sense, it's that it makes sense to the public, then I think that's kind of what we need to go through. Is there room for being able to change like these, being able to change these words, like levers of change framework, rather than it being that, switching over to methodology?
Methodology.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's absolutely room to change. Feel free to add elements, remove elements, whatever is making most sense to you. I will share, I think levers of change framework is a common one in equity work. The Government Alliance on Race and Equity uses a levers of change framework that's operational, normalize. I'm blanking on it, but two of them are normalize and operationalize. So I think that's a fairly standard one, but across all five, feel free to reorganize, add, remove, whatever works for you.
Okay.
Okay, and I noticed one of the things that has been missing or lacking in many of these slides in a successful program plan is evaluation. So specifically speaking, the slide where it says group agreements, it should not be address impact. It really should be acknowledge intent and address impact. I mean, and address and evaluate impact rather than address. Why would we address impact? We wouldn't. We would evaluate the impact. Because there's a beginning and an end, whereas address is simply acknowledging it. So we want to acknowledge intent and to evaluate impact.
Mm-hmm. I think with this is just because it's a group. I think a group agreement that I had put in. It's something that we do often in our meetings, and I definitely like your edit on that, like, because that's what we're actually trying to do, right? Like, rather than just addressing it, we're also evaluating it.
Yes, because if you think about grantsmanship, when you're asking for money, the one question they ask is, well, how exactly are you going to evaluate your efforts?
Mm-hmm.
So the word evaluation is a critical word because it is a call to action, commitment, and accountability.
Right. I feel like we still need something as far as a group agreement between us as commissioners, because we are going to have difficult conversations, being able to address, again, like address the impact from what you're saying and how that has impacted me versus, me focusing on your intent of saying it or assuming what your intent is. I feel like it's the interpersonal piece that I was, that I had mentioned it, or like why I thought it was important to have that included in the group agreement. It's the interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
When we're having these conversations. So I definitely get you on the evaluate when it comes to like the commission as a whole. Yeah, but maybe I was thinking more micro versus macro.
So I'm looking at group agreements under methodology. So under methodology, we would have a group agreement and then do the education and training to accomplish our mission and vision. Because within ourselves, we have to agree our approach within our group. And then outside of the group, we would have education and training for the public at large or the department that is being subjected to improvement and change.
Mm.
So I think group agreement falls under methodology.
Okay.
As would education and training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. Since we're talking about group agreements, is there any other commissioners that haven't had an opportunity to comment or question? Just want to make sure I'm also providing space for that. From people maybe we haven't heard from yet.
I wanted to, on this slide here, I wanted to ask about, since you bring up evaluate, are we evaluating the effectiveness of some of the city teams or groups that have implemented change, or in reference to what we're looking at? Is that part of our for lack of a better term, job? And should that be part of our agreement?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that might be up to us to figure out if that's what we want it to be. I think, am I wrong, Amy?
Well, I'll jump in here just to kind of keep the conversation going. I definitely agree that evaluation is really important. The extent to which this commission will have the data and the tools that you need to make a really thorough evaluation is something that I think will evolve, you know, like, so for example, the mental health program, we have a contract with the Gardner Center. They are professional social scientists. They will have the tools and the data and the statistical methodology to make an evaluation as to how many calls were there, what was the percentage from this population or that population. I'm just not sure to what extent the commission will have those sort of tools at your disposal, but I think it's fair to identify where evaluation is needed, and that it's definitely important. You know, if the city is going to invest resources in a program, we want to evaluate to make sure it's effective. So I think it's a really good point, and something that maybe over time, as you all develop in your work plan, that'll kind of emerge. And so it's like, for example, I think staff will bring you the data that the Gardner Center produces, and the commission will be able to say, yes, it was effective, or no, it wasn't, or we agree with you, or we, you know, to make a recommendation to council that we try and continue this program or expand it, if that makes sense. And then on your group agreements, this is just sort of more behavioral. It's more like a protocol, like how we're going to conduct our meetings is, you know, we're going to be respectful, and we're all going to, as much as it is sort of driving your work product, I think the group agreements was intended as you know, just a meeting protocol, so that it's a productive meeting, as opposed to sort of setting the stage for what exactly it is y'all are going to do. That was more in the vision, and I agree, mission and methodology is one thing, but this, I'm repeating myself. I think the group agreements, again, was just more how you guys are going to be respectful of one another in meetings and conduct your business.
Is evaluation something that you would think we need to be trained on?
It's probably something we would contract out. You know, I'm just not sure, or staff would do, and then talk to the commission about the approach. Because it gets fairly technical, right? You know, you have to have the proper data and access to the data. But
right.
Certainly the results of an evaluation, I think, is something the commission would be super interested in, or requesting an evaluation, or helping to guide what is it you're looking at, is something that this commission could help to define. That's just my take on it.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Well, so Amy, maybe the commission would like to sort of percolate on this between now and next month. And those commissioners that feel really strongly about editing a slide, if you want to come back, I think it would be great to hear some suggested edits for those, you know, not everybody's as editorial as others. So maybe percolate on it and then come back next month and be prepared to finalize something. And I know we can take a stab at making edits based on what the feedback we've heard.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Sharon. Also, can I offer, maybe, do y'all want to form a subcommittee to meet and look at this?
Yep.
You can get 3 people together, and we can schedule a time sometime in the next month to look at these together. Might be a little bit easier to do some editing with a smaller group.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, Amy. Are there 3 people who are really interested in wanting to take a taking a closer look at this?
I am.
Thank you, Commissioner Flores. I was hoping you would say you would.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry you said you would. Anybody else? Maybe two other
I'm
people?
sorry I apologize to the group. I know I've just been so vocal tonight.
I think that's why you're here.
Well, I mean, I just did a lot of the homework, so.
Right. I mean, we all have expertises at things. So your input is valuable, I gotta say.
And
for
I
sure.
have to confess to you, I did make a lot of edits, and it's hard to make edits on a PDF, so I must not have saved them. You
Mm,
know how you make edits on PDF and you save as? I
Right.
think on some of these I did and some of them I did not. So I'm just a little frustrated.
Do we have a soft copy of this, Amy, like a living document maybe? Where it might be easier for people to edit it at home or make changes versus on a PDF?
Yeah, I can probably send that out to the commission in Word.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And I think somebody else was going to be saying something when we were asking for 2 more commissioners.
No, Crystal, you can count me in on that subcommittee.
Thank you, Commissioner Hobson and Cord. And then one more.
Raise my hand.
Is that Commissioner Sanders? Was that you?
Yes.
There we go. We got our 3. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll make sure to reach out to you all.
Perfect. All right. So we will definitely get back to this. And again, thank you for the 3 who are going to help edit it and with the language and whatnot. Perfect. Okay. So I think the next line item is informational update by me. So just to inform you all that, so I'm sure you all know our commission is getting a lot of notice. There was a article done with the SF Chronicle. I believe Mayor Mark was interviewed. I was also interviewed. So we're out there. The public knows about us. They did reach out to taking a potential photo of us to put on the article, considering that the article is already out. I reached out to the writer and they said they didn't need one, but I don't know. I still kind of want to put it out there. Do you guys want to take a group photo? I don't know if that's something that you guys want to do, or maybe even your thoughts around that, since we are getting a lot of publicity right now.
That'd be great.
Okay. I don't need to make a motion for this, do I, Amy? No?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Hi, Amy. I'm so sorry, but I need to go. I told you, at the first time I need to leave at 8:30. Okay, I'm so sorry about that.
Bye, Nancy.
But thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Good
Garcia.
Everybody.
Yeah, so is everybody also okay? Give me a thumbs up if you're okay with maybe taking a group photo. Okay, I think that's perfect. That's majority. So definitely check out that article. I believe Amy had emailed it already to us earlier today. Perfect. And there's definitely nice things said by Mayor Mark and by the article itself. So all right, next line item, items from commissioners. Does any commissioners have any items?
Crystal, when
Yes.
as far as the items from commission, what are some of the things that we would include in that topic? Is it personal things that we're doing in our lives that we want to talk about, or just thoughts or about this commission? Or
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Anything that you might be working on, anything that might be helpful for the commission to know. All of it, I think.
okay.
Just one thing I might suggest is if you hear about trainings or that you think the other commissioners might be interested in, that would be a great thing to share. And that's something that staff will be doing also. Amy and I talked about that a little bit. That we'll try and make you aware, you know, as your time and your permits, you might be interested in doing some things independently. So an upcoming training would be a great thing to share, for example.
Oh, I wish to comment, Amy, thank you for that. I think it was from you, the training for equity. It was by, I think, a group in Kansas or something. I attended one this morning and it was on disability. So we've not really addressed disability in our equity dialogue, but I thought it was very well done this morning. And it was on youth. So it was targeted to youth specifically. And there are two more. One is in August, or maybe two of them are in August, or maybe it's next week. But I signed up for both of them, and the target audience is really youth. So thank you for turning us on to that.
Thank you, Amy.
That may have been from Sharon. Sharon
Oh,
sent
Sharon,
on some
thank you.
implicit bias
Sorry.
training that I probably passed on to everyone here. So thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. You guys have been so helpful. Really happy you guys are here. Perfect. And just if I can ask Commissioner Hobson and Court, did you have an item that you wanted to discuss or bring up?
No, I just wanted to find out what are some of the things, does it have to relate to this commission or just things that are going on that we want to share, you know, events in our life? I just wanted to know.
Oh, cool. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So if we don't have any items from commission, items from staff.
I don't have any items. I don't know if any other staff on the call have anything they'd like to share.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, I think it is 8:29. I know it was definitely a long meeting. I want to thank all of you for being here. I think we did some work, really good work today so far. So definitely appreciate you guys taking the time to be here, as well as our city officials who are also here. Just wanted to take note of that. Looks like we got Chief McGowan is here, Chief Campbell, and of course, City Council is here as well, and the city manager. So thank you again for being here, and for the rest of the city staff. Cool. I think with that, we could adjourn. Everybody good with that?
I second it.
There you go. We got a second. All right, you all. Well, definitely have a good night. And hope you get lots of rest today.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Good
All right.
night.
Thanks.